We have recently done a number of engagements. Our startups are looking at Korea as a potential market. And I'm extremely proud to have my old friend, Ambassador Verma, our Ambassador of India to Moscow with us in my own hall, Vigyan Bhavan, who coincidentally happens to be in Delhi today, and he has very kindly agreed to spare his time to be with us today. A very, very warm welcome to you, Ambassador. India has seen a tremendous growth in the startup ecosystem in the last 5 years. It was ignited by Honorable Prime Minister's call on 16th of January 2016. It's exactly 5 years, and we celebrate 5 years of the Startup India initiative. We are now the third largest startup ecosystem. We have more than 41,000 startups. And these startups are working across all sectors of economy. From agriculture, industry, Internet of Things, Industry 4.0. We've had 11 unicorns last year, despite pandemic, and now the number of unicorns in India is said to be 36. As this startup movement grows within the country, as entrepreneurship takes root, we see more and more vibrant entrepreneurs coming in from not just metros, but tier 2 and tier 3 cities. We have ambitions of giving wings to our entrepreneurs to explore markets much beyond our country. Our Prime Minister has said, "Make in India for the world." And from this, we figured out what could be our objectives for the startup ecosystem. There are 3 important objectives that we decided for ourselves. 1, providing access of global markets to startups. Number 2, mobilizing global capital for investments in Indian startups. And finally, creation and environment of absorption of frugal Indian innovation in global markets. I am extremely happy to report that on our call, 24 missions from 5 continents expressed their desire to engage intensively on these 3 objectives for promoting startups in this country. All the ambassadors representing those geographies have shown active involvement with startups. We are running more than 8 dedicated programs with a number of countries. Very recently, we did the first ever National Startup Awards. And I want to inform everyone that when we asked for the wish list of the winners and the finalists, half of them wanted to go global. They wanted to explore geographies such as France, UAE, UK, US, Germany, Singapore, Japan, Australia, and so many others. I am extremely proud to have our ambassadors join in this program. I welcome all of them. And the way I want to start this session is, I will ask one question to all the 5 excellencies, and then we will have specific questions addressed to all the different geographies. Now, my first question to all of you is, what are some leading bilateral programs that your geography is conducting with India? May I now request Ambassador Tomar from Germany to start this. Ambassador Tomar, please.
Good morning to everyone from Berlin. First of all, I'd just like to thank you for the invitation to participate in this event. It is indeed a great honor. Also, it's my pleasure to be able to join my colleagues from very important countries at this event. So in terms of bilateral programs that you just referred to, I'd like to mention that startups or promotion of startups is a very important part of our bilateral cooperation agenda. And the focus of the cooperation is to adapt best practices, discover areas of synergies, and create linkages with the industry to help startups. Actually, not only in Indian startups, but even German startups to work with partners in India. And you would be aware that we have a bilateral mechanism called the Intergovernmental Consultations, at which the leaders of our both countries, Chancellor Merkel and Prime Minister Modi, meet every other year. And at the fifth India-Germany Intergovernmental Consultations, which were held in November 2019, cooperation in startups was identified as a priority area of cooperation, and both countries signed JDI in the area of startups. Subsequent to this, we are planning the first meeting actually of a digital group of experts, mainly from the private sector. And the purpose of this is to identify common projects in which the private sector on both sides can work together. So this is a very important mechanism, and what we have done is that we have proposed startups from our side, and the German side has done the same. Unfortunately, the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic, has proved to be a little bit of a dampener, because this meeting was actually supposed to be held in 2020, but because of the pandemic, it's been pushed, and we are now looking at February 2021 to have. And so this is the first time you have a digital group of experts from both sides who are planning to map out actual areas of cooperation. In addition to this, we also have something called the German-India Startup Exchange Program, GINSEP, which was started in 2017. Actually, you just mentioned that in 2016, January, Prime Minister's call for promoting startups was acted upon, and this was one of actually the very first initiatives that were taken to build greater awareness of each other's capabilities and the possibilities of cooperation. And in addition to that, we have regular exchanges with CII, Invest India, NASSCOM, online events, to essentially inform stakeholders on both sides regarding facilitating structures and incentives that are offered by both countries, and priority sectors for funding in India. Also in Germany, And the latest event that we held was in November 2020, when 7 Indian startups pitched to 30 European VCs for Series A funding. So this is an important initiative. And in addition to that, I must also mention a very particular initiative which our consulate in Frankfurt is doing, which is to run a startup competition for Indian students. And the ideas that are pitched, innovative ideas, are going to be created by a panel of experts, and viable select ideas would be shared with Indian companies for further follow-up. So I'll just leave it at that, just to give you a broad picture of the bilateral agenda and bilateral area. I must mention, though, that I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned that we have 41,000 startups. The German figure on the other side is, as of 2020, what we have is 2,000 active startups. So it's, you know, in terms of the numbers, they certainly don't match up. But it was also interesting that last year, Germany had 12 unicorns. We had 11, they had 12. As you just mentioned, we are now at 36. I must now try and find out how many Germany has in 2021. But I'll leave it at that for the moment. Thank you.
Thanks so very much, Mike. Thanks so very much. And so interesting, and to know about so many programs that your embassy and the consulate in Frankfurt is doing. And I'm sure all of this information is extremely useful to all our startups, young friends and entrepreneurs who are watching this program. Now, let me come to UAE, Ambassador Pawan. What are the major bilateral engagements that we are having with UAE?
Thank you, Anilji, and hello to everyone, all my colleagues. I think, as you rightly identified, UAE is certainly a preferred destination for startups and entrepreneurs from the region who look to scale up their businesses. And there are several programs and initiatives in the UAE that have supported Indian startups and provided them some global market access. One of the oldest in this regard is the Dubai Future Accelerators under the Dubai Future Foundation. Since the inception of this accelerator in 2016, about 11 Indian startups have participated in the different cohorts organized by this accelerator. And I'm pleased to say that they've mostly done pretty well and have then had opportunities to collaborate with the UAE government entities. So, for example, QNext and Smart IoT participated with the Dubai Electricity and Water Authority, or DEWA, and Kocher Tech partnered with Etisalat Digital, Shopar 360 with Dubai Economy, Kocher Tech with Ship MIS Technologies with KHDA, the Knowledge and Human Development Authority, and so on. Importantly, all of them provided technological and engineering solutions for these government entities. Separately, Anilji, I have to mention that the Dubai Chamber of Commerce and Industry also organized the Dubai Tech Tour in 2019. The first one, which was a virtual trade mission joined by 15 Indian startups specializing in fintech and health tech. In addition, the Dubai Startup Landscape and Pitch Competition, which was held in June 2019 and was organized by the Dubai Startup Hub, successfully attracted 16 Indian startups, of which 2 of them won free office space and company setup support in Dubai. So you can see that Indian startups who come here, once they pitch well, are doing very well. Recently, the Central Bank of UAE and the Abu Dhabi Global Markets conducted a virtual roadshow for Indian startups in September last year, where 5 Indian startups pitched to the jury, and another 2 were selected for the Global FinTech Abu Dhabi Festival. Further, DP World, which is a large logistics and a port development company, they have launched a dedicated incubation center for Indian startups and small businesses at Jafza, or the Jebel Ali Free Zone. Here, Indian startups can set up their businesses with a minimum monthly cost and get trading license and furnished workspace and even visa support. So as you can see, there are many programs and opportunities for Indian startups in the UAE. On our part at the embassy, I recall that we had, back in 2017, organized a Startup India Summit in Dubai in partnership with TAI Dubai and iSpirit. And I'm happy to say that more recently, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we were able to facilitate interaction between the Abu Dhabi Global Market and India's National Health Authority, or NHA. So the NHA has now spoken to the Abu Dhabi Department of Health, Abu Dhabi Global Markets Sub 71, as well as the Plug and Play Healthcare Accelerator, about possible collaboration where Abu Dhabi would welcome NHA selected healthcare startups and provide them with funding, regulatory approval, and assistance in the accelerator program to expand abroad and gain international experience and revenue. In return, NHA will help the Abu Dhabi-based health tech startups to expand into India. So that's one recent example of something that we've been able to facilitate, and I hope that we'll have plenty more opportunities in the future. I'll leave it at that for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let me tell you, 11 out of 36 winners of the National Startup Awards, they want to expand to UAE. 39 out of 131 National Startup Award finalists, they want to expand to UAE. So we look forward to more intensive interaction with the embassy there to support our companies expand their markets in UAE.
Certainly. Thank you.
And now I move on to Ambassador Shripriya from South Korea. Ambassador, you have been proactive in a number of programs related to startups. Please recount some of it.
Thank you so much. I think I must begin first of all with the MOU that we signed in 2019 when Prime Minister was here in Korea for a state visit, and that I think was really a starting point for much of what we have tried to do on the startup arena between India and Korea. And in fact, I think it was quite remarkable that the implementation of that MOU was so swift, because the India-Korea Startup Center was set up in Gurugram within 6 months of the signature of the MOU, which is quite an extraordinary speed and dispatch. We've been quite lucky in that the Korean government has really prioritized India as far as its own startup initiatives are concerned. The Korean National IT Industry Promotion Agency also has an office in India, in Bangalore. And what the Koreans are really trying to do is to synergize the activities and innovation at all the startup centers. They have centers in Seattle, in Tel Aviv, in Singapore, in Helsinki, and in Singapore, apart from the one in Gurugram. So they really try and bring them all together to try and get some best practices, get some new ideas, get some innovations flowing, so that they're able to cross-fertilize in a way. KISED, which is the Korean Institute of Startups and Entrepreneurship Development, has also been motivated to support Indian startups in more and more in their programs. And that has also been very helpful to us when we have tried to steer Indian startups in the direction of opportunities that lie in Korea. When you made your introductory remarks, you pointed out that there are three main things which startups look forward to. One is market access, one is the capacity to absorb innovation, and the third is mobilizing global capital. And I think it's in the third area that really there is so much of promise as far as Korea is concerned, and that's what we have tried to do from the perspective of the embassy. We have started a new series. We're calling it the Global VC Connect series, in which we have worked with DPIIT, Startup India, as well as NASSCOM to try and do some matchmaking of Indian startups and Korean venture capitalists. Here again, I think the complementarities are quite profound and quite obvious. The ROK has tremendous investable capital. They also have a great research and innovation, support system, and the kind of VCs which they have, which range from full-fledged funds and asset management companies that are focusing on startups, and they also have the in-house VC arms of the big conglomerates, which really try to play to their own areas of strength. So, for example, you have seen things like Hyundai, which has invested in India in the mobility sector in Ola and in Rev. Samsung has a startup program which has been in place for many years, and they have also invested in quite a few Indian startups. A very good example of an Indo-Korean collaboration in the field of edutech is the startup TagHive, which is really one of the early Samsung investments. Some of the big financial investors, traditional investors like Mirae Assets, like KB Venture, and so on, have already invested in a big way in India. So really what we are trying to do at the embassy is to steer this kind of interest and this kind of capital that exists in Korea in the direction of the right kind of startups in India. Try and inform the Korean companies and investors about the whole range of services and products and innovations that are being developed by Indian startups. And lastly, to inform Indian startups of the kind of incentives, the kind of programs, the kind of opportunities that exist in Korea that will enable them to, in a way, leverage what this country has to offer. Not merely for the Korean market, but I think really for the global market. So I'll stop there and just end by saying that the embassy is really looking forward to continuing this down this path and doing more in terms of these kind of B2B investor startup connect events in the months to come in partnership with all our Indian agencies. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Now, I would move on to Russia. Ambassador Venkatesh Verma is here with me in Vigyan Bhavan. Very less is known about Russia as a startup ecosystem. We've been having engagements with Russia on a number of issues. Would you please highlight what are the two engagements that we are doing with Russia? Ambassador Venkatesh, please.
Thank you, Anilji, and congratulations for organizing this fantastic virtual summit on startups. And thank you and thanks to your wonderful team that you have, including from Invest India. Well, the Russia story is known not necessarily in the Western world. So I think part of the lessons that we can learn as part of our global outreach is that there is an extremely important, innovative, vibrant startup system in the larger Anglo-Saxon world. But there is also, if not at the same scale and not at the same size, there is a vibrant startup ecosystem in Russia as well. In fact, India and Russia are quite similar. Russia is 47th in innovation index. We are somewhere around there. Russia has about 40,000 startups. The number is similar to what you mentioned. There are at least 4 unicorns which are a huge success in Russia, but are of global significance. Yandex being one of them. Yandex is a Google-like service in Russia, hugely successful, and it has succeeded in Russia without Russia banning Google like it was banned in China. So it has succeeded in a very competitive environment. So human capital and talent is another great similarity between India and Russia. Institutional strengthening is a requirement in both countries. We do have the necessity to create greater awareness, and that process has started. In December of 2018, the CII and the Skolkovo Foundation, we have anchored our startup activity through Skolkovo Foundation, which itself has about more than 2,000 startups located within itself. CII Skolkovo Foundation Summit was held in December 2018. And when our Prime Minister visited Vladivostok in 2019, he launched India-Russia Innovation Bridge, which is a bilateral entrepreneurial exchange and accelerator program. Similarly, we have our India-Russia Tech Bridge. We have had 2 startup challenges, the Startup India MTS Challenge and the Startup India Kalyani Educational Challenge. In July 2020, DST FICCI and the Russian Foundation for Assistance to Smaller Innovative Enterprises launched an India-Russia Joint Technology Assessment and Accelerator and Commercialization Program. Though it's not focused entirely on startups, it has a huge ecosystem for promoting startups. But I think what the Russia story shows is one great innovation, and the startup was done by the Prime Minister himself. So if there's one startup that is linked directly to the Prime Minister, is when he visited Sochi in the summer of 2018, he was invited by President Putin to visit what is called a serious educational center in Sochi. Prime Minister visited that center and he said that we should have innovation programs of interaction between the Atal Innovation Mission and the Sirius Center in Sochi. And we're very happy to inform that this is, in fact, the startup of startups, because the best and the brightest of kids in Russia go to the Sochi Sirius Center. The Atal Innovation Mission brings together the extraordinarily bright kids that we have here in India. And on 2 instances, the President and the Prime Minister have had an opportunity to witness some of the innovations that these young kids have taken forward. So this is quite a unique aspect of what we're doing in the context of Russia. India and Russia also cooperate in the context of the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The SCO Startup Forum has also provided an opportunity for some cooperation. So I would end my initial presentation by saying that there is high-level attention, high-level commitment. There's great talent in both countries. Of course, this is only the beginning. We wish to move forward, and we have some specific ideas, but I'll leave it to the next few questions to take it up. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And let me tell you, 7 of our NSA winners, they want to expand to Russia. And some of them are outstanding. They are, developing satellite launch vehicles, and the capacities and capabilities that we have in Russian technology ecosystem are complementary, as you just mentioned. Now I'm moving on to Tokyo, and I will request Ambassador Sanjay from Japan to let us know how we are engaging with Japan. We have seen a number of engagements. Very, very recently, there is a huge fund of funds being created by the Japanese investors specifically for India. And there are so many other things. Ambassador Sanjay, please.
Thanks, Secretary Agarwal, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity for Nichiro from Tokyo. If we look at the start of India-Japan startup collaboration and conversation, it all started in September 2017 with the Japanese Prime Minister Abe visited India. And the Japanese Prime Minister Abe and our own Prime Minister, they directed to establish India-Japan Startup Hub, which was set up in 2018 in Bangalore. And it is working as one of the major interfaces between the two startup ecosystems. Thanks to Invest India, there are a number of practical issues which are being clarified by them for the digital partnership between India and Japan. Thereafter, we signed a partnership agreement with Japan, which is known as India-Japan Digital Partnership. That has got one of the subsectors as a startup initiative. And therefore, that becomes a very important milestone for us, as well as a very important axis around which India-Japan startup collaboration has been developing. A few of the successes which I would like to quote from the embassy's perspective. We have a Japan VC Connect, Japan Venture Capitalist Connect, in which Indian Embassy in Tokyo, together with NASSCOM, organized the first ever pitching event, and this was a live pitching event, not very much heard of 26 Indian startups way back in September 2019. About 120 Japanese venture capitalists and venture arms of the corporate sectors of Japan, they participated. And I'm very glad to tell you that right in that particular auditorium, we got $10 million as the capital raised for these startups. At that time, there were only 5 startups out of 26 which were picked up. I've been given to understand that now 18 of them have already signed some kind of arrangement with their Japanese partners. The second edition of the Japan VC Connect will be hosted on a digital platform. But between the first and second, since last May, we have already held 7 pitching events. And each pitching event had close to about 6 to 7 Indian startups. So 47 startups from India have been accommodated through such pitching events. And they are already in touch with their Japanese potential partners, discussing various issues on the kind of partnership that could be developed. We have close to about 150 plus one-to-one meeting that these 47 had, and they are looking forward to it. Mr. Agarwal, you talked about the NSA from India. NSA pitching events are going to be held here as well on 27th of January. The second session is scheduled, and we are expecting about 10 Indian startups from agri-value chain. You talked about the fund of funds. Yes, this is a very unique experimentation that Japan is doing. And this fund of funds is only targeting Indian startups. The total amount is $187 million. Target is about 200 plus startups. The concept has already been implemented now. And about $100 million have already been raised, largely from the Japanese lead investors. From India, there is hardly any flow. $5 million is what I believe. I'm not advised to reveal the name of the person or the company in India. But probably Indian venture capitalists could also pour in some more money so that collectively there is more fund available for the Indian startups to move ahead. 2 of the Indian VCs have been involved by fund of funds to take things forward. Just to give you a couple of examples. Since 2011, when Japan started exploring the Indian startup ecosystem, which was much before we went into the Startup India mission. SoftBank of Japan had already invested in 25 startups, close to about $10 billion. Then you have Dream Incubator in 23 investments. Red Bright in 17 investments, Kuwait Fund India 6 investments, UTech in 3 investments, Denso has its own portfolio, Toyota in 2 investments, Global Brain 2 investments, so on and so forth. So about 100 plus Indian startups have been provided funding from these companies. I'm not talking about the technical collaborations which go much beyond these 100 startups. And we do provide a lot of support to our startups, both for matchmaking, but at the same time in our role as an advisory agent as to how to interact with the Japanese businesses, how to interact with the Japanese startup ecosystem, how to succeed in the Japanese market, what are the sectors they should focus on when targeting Japan. I'll stop here, Mr. Agarwal, and if there are any further clarifications to be sought, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure all this information is extremely useful for all those who are looking at this session and those who will be actually looking at recordings of these sessions, which will be available on our Prarambh platform for a long time. Now, once we've had this initial round, now looking into the shortage of time, we just have about 20 minutes of time left. So I will directly come to the last question that I wanted to ask each and every one of you. What are your recommendations for the way forward? What do you think we should be collaborating between your country and ours to support our startups from India getting into your markets, for getting investors from your country getting into India or Indian startups, and to support our government's vision of making in India for the world? So may I now start with Ambassador Tober first from Berlin. Ambassador Tober from Germany, please.
Thank you. That was a very interesting round indeed. So just coming to Germany, going forward, what I would like to suggest is a few things. One is that India and Germany are strategic partners. We've had a strategic partnership for 20 years. And we therefore have many commonalities in that we share defining principles and values like democracy and respect for law. So there is a natural environment for promoting cooperation. And in this, what I would like to suggest is taking advantage of the natural synergies that we have. First of all, it's very important that Indian startups participate in German startup events and in boot camps that are held in Germany. I mean, that is the best way to reach out. And more events are now being held virtually. So it provides an easier mechanism, an easier modality for participation. I would also like to mention that it is important to map our own strengths with trends in other countries. So in Germany, for example, apart from fintechs, startups in mobility and clean tech are increasingly relevant, increasingly popular. So there is an increased focus on environment, on society, on governance. And I think the most important thing in Germany is in the field of AI and digital solutions. So if we, going forward, we map this carefully, the imprint of AI and digitalization is going to increase. And the two major success factors for any AI venture would be expertise in developing software and data to help the software learn. And our expertise in software is regarded highly and already being harnessed by German businesses to a great extent. There is very important presence of Indian software companies in Germany. And if we can formulate a forward-looking data policy, I think what European and certainly German companies and Germany in general would be encouraged by is a robust data policy. And that would be a very important part of the ongoing efforts for establishing a conducive ecosystem for startups. While return on investments, I mean, there is no getting away from it. Money matters, and return on investments will continue to dominate decisions for investors. Startup solutions, startups with a focus on environment, sustainability, and governance will find a greater acceptance in Germany. And this actually also maps well with our own priorities for sustainable development. And there is a way for us to learn from each other. I'd just like to mention a couple of programs that Germany has to promote their startups. And I mean, I know that we are doing a lot in our area to promote Indian startups. But just a couple of points to mention. That first of all, they have something called the German Accelerator Program, GAP, and this is for to help German startups access international markets, especially in the US and Asia. And under this program, startups can avail free office space and are helped in their very nascent stage. And the German federal government is also running a paid service called Next Step South Asia, which is a market entry program for German startups looking for advanced stages of funding. And they have a focus on Asian markets like Singapore, South Korea, Japan, as well as India. And what the German government does is that they visit these countries as a part of a boot camp. It's a 9-day boot camp, in fact, to give them a first-hand feel of the market and customer expectation and investor connect. And I know that CII is looking to see if something like this can be organized in India as well. And I'd also like to mention that Germany has a system of digital hubs. So, for example, FinTech is based in Berlin. You have a logistic hub in Hamburg. You have an AI hub in Karlsruhe. And this has also helped focus expertise and attract international VCs looking for specific profiles. And then, of course, they have Startup Association and as well as various financial support structures, which again is very, very important for startups. And in this, both the federal government as well as the EU structural fund, plus Germany has a federal system like India does. There are 16 states, and each state has their own support mechanism as well, including financial support mechanism. So I think it's important that we know about what other countries are offering and to see where we can matchmake and provide the greater synergies. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so very much for these insights. I would now move on to Ambassador Shripriya from Korea. What do you think should be the way forward for Korea and India in terms of startup collaboration?
I think as I mentioned earlier, India and ROK are already off to a very good start in terms of what we are seeking to do with each other across a whole range of sectors. And as Ambassador Thoma mentioned in the context of Germany, considering that we have a special strategic partnership, I think startup collaboration is a very natural element of this relationship going forward. I think as a consequence of this, there is a certain awareness and a certain respect, mutual respect for what Indian strengths are and what Korean strengths are amongst each other. Korean capital, Korean innovation, Korean startup ecosystem, as a partner for Indian talent, Indian drive, Indian enterprise, and the Indian market, as well as what we are doing now in terms of expanding the scope of our digital connectivity, the reach of our IT. There's a lot of excitement amongst Korean investors in the fact that Indian IT spread and really the small and very, very vibrant companies emerging from the tier 2 and tier 3 towns and the kind of markets that these towns and cities also offer. I think all this is really are areas that need to be explored. The Korean new the digital new deal, which is really prioritizing technology and IT and innovation as a way of moving out of the COVID related stresses on the economy. It's a very good match for what we are trying to do in India in terms of harnessing IT and technology. I think I would really say that going forward, we need to do more of what we intensify really and accelerate what we have already done by way of partnering and enabling the venture capitalists, the investors and the Indian startups to know about each other, to understand what products and what services are on offer, to enable, very interestingly, to enable Korean startups and SMEs to take advantage of the low-cost Indian, not only the human resource but also the manufacturing ecosystem. I was very struck by the kind of innovations that some very small companies are coming up with in Korea. For instance, there's a very, very, very small company in a small place in the country which has come up with a new contagion-free, negative pressure device to handle infectious patients, and they're patented. I mean, if there is some way in which we can enable these small companies to partner with Indian small companies, I think this would also translate and fit in very well into our Make in India framework. So basically, I would say that leverage the kind of programs and incentives and strengths which the two countries have to offer, enable more interaction, enable more connections, enable more conversations, so that we are able to take many of these leads and these points of interest into active, practical collaboration going forward.
Thank you very much. Moving on to UAE now. Ambassador Pawan, how do you think we could help our startups get into UAE markets and get more investments from there?
Sure. I think, in addition to what has already been said, the fact is that, apart from being strategic partners, I think both India and UAE are also hubs of technology and innovation. Now, we have a very close relationship in several areas, and as my colleague Sripriya said, this is a natural progression, and we are working to connect the startups. And we have seen with experience in the past that by them participating in these various competitions and accelerator programs here in the UAE, they've got opportunities to work with government entities and show their capabilities. While this can certainly continue, we should bear in mind that we have over 3 million Indians in the UAE, and some of them are the top business persons in this country. So they understand the Indian mindset and can draw in many more, companies to come and look at opportunities here. When I say opportunities, UAE per se doesn't really offer a big marketplace with a population of just under 10 million. But UAE is the hub for the MENA region, the Middle East and North Africa region. So, for example, there are funds like sovereign wealth funds like Mubadala, who are trying to actively encourage investment into specific entities that bring employment to the UAE. And for this, they are ready to provide grants, funds, and investments through their VC arms. So this could provide an opportunity for Indian startups to come and look at UAE as a gateway to regional growth. Another point about the importance of UAE would be the fact that Dubai is a financial hub for the region. So the opportunities available for funding are immense. Just recently, the Dubai Startup Hub has launched a $100 million fund in fintech for attracting entrepreneurs from India. They keep holding various programs to try and attract such startups. Similarly, the Dubai International Financial Center is also organizing many events to sort of get fintechs to come and scale up from India. So there's a whole range of options which I won't get into detail given the paucity of time, but both for leveraging financial options and to look at markets for the whole region. I think UAE can serve as a good example for Indian startups to try and get into. And as I said, we are always available to try and see these connects between the two sides.
Absolutely. This must be music to the ears of our startups, Now, I would turn to my friend, Ambassador Venkatesh, and ask him, how do you see our engagement going on?
Yeah, Anilji, thank you. I'll make 4 points. First, I think the great strengths of Indian entrepreneurship were put to the test during this very stressful COVID year that has gone by. This has produced immense success stories at various levels. Some are at the level of concept, some are at the level of incubation, some are at the level of implementation. I think this COVID success story of India needs to be put out everywhere, and we would be very happy to carry forward the story in Russia. Because when you prove success, you also, during stressful times, you prove resilience. And resilience both in terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of technology innovation, in terms of societal relevance. Because I think startups flourish when there's societal relevance, and the societies have been turned upside down by the COVID, and this is an excellent opportunity for us to package and profile our true successes. That's the first point. Second is there are a number of funds in Russia which are interested in the Indian market. They're already active in the Indian market. Systema Asia Fund, there's an entrepreneur called Yuli Milna, the Russia's VEB Innovation, and an Indian company called SRAY have established a Viman Capital Private Fund. There are a number of Russian entrepreneurs who are already active and in cooperation with Indian startups. So this needs to be promoted. And I think at some institutional policy level, a certain reassurance on investments is important. Of course, this is not specifically a startup issue, but I think the absence of an investment treaty is often mentioned when private investors do look at India. I don't think it's an absolute obstacle, but surely the absence of a bilateral investment treaty framework is creating a sort of a few doubts which we would be best to sort of to remove. In Russia's case, of course, states and governments play a very important role. We are well placed in that respect because we have excellent bilateral relations. Creating platforms. And from the embassy side, we assure you that by next week, we will have a separate link on our embassy website to create the startup story. We've had it mixed up with a lot of other stories as part of our commercial and trade relations, but we assure you that we will do that. But one suggestion that we have is why don't we do this every 6 months? Create an international digital platform for companies from India, startup companies from India, interacting with companies from different parts of the world. My good friend, my colleague from Germany, mentioned, part of the solution is just turning up at these various big events. I mean, if our startup companies were to participate in events taking place elsewhere, like in Germany, we hear a similar refrain from Russian foundations. Skolkova has mentioned to us that if Indian startups were a little more proactive, I think we could. But I think it's a two-way street. So every 6 months, and the embassy in Moscow will be very happy to sort of gather all the Russian startups to participate in this platform, and I'm sure all my colleagues participating today would be equally delighted to put together this. So a regular conversation between the startups themselves, and since we have now broken through this DVC revolution, I think this can be done. This is not a substitute for face-to-face meetings. There are at least 3 big international events in Russia: the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, the Sochi Economic Forum, the Vladivostok Eastern Economic Forum. We would be delighted to have special sessions organized in those meetings for Indian startups to come and sell their extraordinary story. While on the concept of Russia, I think Russia is not just Moscow. There are at least 12 regions which have very vibrant startup ecosystems. That's very similar to India. Here also the regional dimension is very important. So we would be very happy, for instance, as part of the India, Russia, Japan trilateral initiative, we have a separate subsect on startup cooperation. And my good friend from Tokyo, I'm sure Ambassador Verma would be happy to support this proposal. Say, for example, in the Eastern Economic Forum meeting in Vladivostok later this year, we can have a separate session on startups. So more awareness, more policy promotion, but also putting out the India success story, I think, is some of the suggestions that I would like to offer. Thank you.
Absolutely. This, I think you've just triggered a number of initiatives that you are planning to see, and I'm sure they are going to be extremely valuable for the startups in our country. And now we have already almost reached our time, but I would extend my time and I would request Ambassador Verma from Tokyo to please put forward his views on how we should take this engagement forward with Japan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Agarwal. There are 3 phrases which I had coined about 1.5 years back: co-innovate, co-create, and co-produce. These 3 terms are not to be mistaken, because so far the Indian startups have been looking at Japan for financing and financial assistance. What we need to do, if we really want to upgrade ourselves, is to look at the requirements of the 2 societies to start with, and then move on to other societies to innovate products. Once the innovation part is over, then we will need to do the piloting of the project, which is co-creation. Once the co-creation is over, we can get into the industrial aspect of the entire cooperation, and we can go for co-production. So these 3 pillars would become extremely important. Many other things have already been spoken by my colleagues from different other capitals. I will not like to repeat that for the paucity of time. Just one more thing which I would like to emphasize upon. Japan is a very different culture as compared to the Western culture we are more used to. It is a more physical culture. The digital selling may not help much. And therefore, we would look forward to receiving as many Indian startups in Japan as possible, for them to interact with their Japanese counterparts on financing, on innovation, on creation, on production, and finally on marketing strategies and management strategies. Let them keep coming here, and we will, as an embassy, support them as much as possible. Some of the areas where our startups could start focusing at the moment, as far as Japan market is concerned, is manufacturing and robotics, which includes automotive industry, fintech, healthcare, health tech, and medtech. So I'll leave here because I know we are already short of time, and hand it over back to Mr. Agarwal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Verma. Now this has been an exceptional session. I'm sure our viewers must have seen the commitment of Government of India, not only from the Ministry of Commerce, but all our missions abroad, And what you've seen is just a sample of 5 missions explaining about the initiatives that they are taking for promoting startups, for promoting Make in India for the world. Let me promise you that similar work is being done across the globe. All our missions are actively engaged in promoting startups, and we would be happy, absolutely happy, to support any of our businesses, any of our startups who would like to access international markets. I must thank Ambassador Tomar, Ambassador Pawan from UAE, Ambassador Sanjay from Tokyo, Ambassador Shripriya from Korea, and Ambassador Venkatesh from Moscow for taking out time, giving us attention, and supporting our startups. I'm sure the subject of startups will occupy a little more of your mind space, and that is only what we need to support Indian startups in your geographies. Thank you so very much. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Thank you.
Bhai, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Well done.
Well done.
ये तो बहुत ही अच्छा सचिन, बहुत ही अच्छा सचिन.
To the point, काम की बात.
उत्साहस्य लोकेषु न किंचित अपि दुर्लभम. हमारे उत्साह, हमारी स्पिरिट से बढ़कर के दुनिया में कोई फोर्स नहीं होगा. उत्साह परम बलम.
Prarambh, Utsaha Param Balam. Taking inspiration from Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi's vision. Let us ignite the next major movement for startups. Let's celebrate the ideas and the excitement. Let's exchange awareness and knowledge. Let's expand the horizons. Let's establish accolades. Let's embrace. Let us initiate. Prarambh, Utsaha Param Balam. Startup India International Summit.